This photo shows slave children playing, but experts saw what was on the ground. Dr. Michael Torres had digitized thousands of historical photographs during his 15 years at the Library of Congress, but few stopped him cold like this one. The 1854 daguerreotype showed 5 black children playing in the dirt yard of an Ashford plantation in Georgia, their faces mid-laugh, bodies frozen by the long exposure time required for early photography. The image came with documentation claiming it showed the contentment and happiness of our Negro children, who spend their days in carefree play. It was textbook pro-slavery propaganda from the 1850s, designed to counter abolitionist criticism by depicting enslaved people, especially children, as happy and well-treated. Michael had seen hundreds of such photographs. They always unsettled him, knowing the lies they told, the reality they concealed. But something about this one felt different. Perhaps the children's expressions, or how their bodies were positioned, or the strange quality of the ground beneath them. He loaded the high-resolution scan into imaging software for archival documentation. Standard procedure required examining every inch for damage or details needing preservation. He started with faces, ages ranging from 5 to 10, then clothing, the simple cotton garments typical of enslaved children. Then he focused on the ground. Bare dirt, packed hard by foot traffic, with struggling grass patches in Georgia red clay. As Michael increased magnification on the area around the children's hands and feet, his breath caught. Objects littered the dirt, partially buried, half obscured by shadow and 1854 photography limitations, but unmistakably present. Small metal bands, chain links, carved wooden shapes, crude toys perhaps, or something darker. Michael leaned back, heart racing. He zoomed further, adjusting contrast and brightness, using digital enhancement to reveal details invisible to naked eyes in the original photograph. The metal bands were shackles, child-sized shackles, small enough for thin wrists and ankles. The chains, the children were literally playing with chains, using them like jump ropes, draped across arms like bracelets. The wooden objects were toys carved from something horrible. Punishment posts, broken tools, the very materials of their enslavement. Michael grabbed his phone with trembling hands. Dr. Jennifer Washington, director of the American Memory Project, needed to see this immediately. This wasn't just propaganda. This documented something far more disturbing. Jennifer Washington arrived within 20 minutes, bringing Dr. Raymond Foster, a historian specializing in childhood slavery. They crowded around Michael's monitor, examining the enhanced images he'd prepared. "I've magnified each visible object," Michael explained, displaying close-ups. "At least a dozen items within 3 feet of the children. All appear to be restraint instruments or objects repurposed from plantation punishment equipment." Raymond leaned closer, his expression darkening. "That's a wrist shackle," he said, pointing to a small iron band near the leftmost child's foot. "Look at the size. Designed for maybe a 6 or 7-year-old. Jennifer examined another image. "This chain, the center girl is holding it like a jump rope. You can see both hands gripping it, curved as if she was mid-swing when told to freeze for exposure." "Look at this wooden figure," Michael said, zooming further. "It's carved to look like a doll, but the wood is wrong. Too dark, too weathered, and metal fragments embedded in it. Nails, maybe, or iron pieces." Raymond's face paled. "That's from a whipping post. The discoloration is bloodstained, soaked into wood over years. Someone, probably one of these children, carved a toy from the post where enslaved people were punished." Silence filled the room. Jennifer paced to the window overlooking the National Mall. "We need full context. Who took this? Why? And did the photographer know what these children were playing with?" Michael pulled up documentation. Charles Whitfield, a Savannah professional photographer specializing in plantation portraiture, hired by owners to create images for northern newspapers and abolitionist meetings as evidence that slavery was humane. "So this was propaganda," Raymond said. "Whitfield was paid to show happy, well-treated enslaved people, but he either didn't notice what surrounded these children or didn't care," Jennifer finished. "Because to him and those who commissioned this, the objects were invisible. Just debris. They literally couldn't see the horror because they refused to acknowledge these children as fully human." Raymond began taking notes. "I need Ashford plantation records. If these restraints were child-sized, there should be documentation. Purchase orders, blacksmith invoices, maybe punishment logs." "Those logs exist?" Michael asked, horrified. "Sometimes," Raymond said grimly. "Not all plantations kept them, but some did. Meticulous records of every punishment, including to children." Jennifer studied the children's faces again. "Their expressions aren't naturally smiling. Their mouths smile, but their eyes don't. This is performative joy, doing what they were told for the camera." Raymond Foster arrived at the Georgia Historical Society on a humid morning, armed with a specific materials list. The archivist, Mr. Henry Crawford, had prepared several boxes from the Ashford Plantation collection. Vast archives donated in the 1920s, largely untouched since. The Ashfords were meticulous record keepers, Mr. Crawford explained, leading Raymond to a climate-controlled research room. Everything from daily weather to livestock inventories. And yes, punishment records. Disturbing to read, I warn you. The first box contained plantation ledgers from 1850, 1860. Raymond found what he needed within an hour. A Charleston blacksmith invoice dated March 1852 for restraints, juvenile size, quantity 6 sets, total cost $42. Juvenile size, 6 sets, $42. Significant expense in 1852, equivalent to roughly $1,500 today. Someone paid substantial money for custom-made child restraints. The second box held punishment logs, exactly as horrific as feared. Meticulous records of every whipping, confinement, every punitive measure administered to enslaved people at Ashford, including children. The entries were clinical, emotionless. March 15th, 1853. Girl, age 7, name Patience, 10 lashes for dropping pottery. June 3rd, 1853. Boy, age 9, name Samuel, confined in shackles 24 hours for attempting to learn reading. Raymond's hands shook, photographing each page. The logs confirmed children as young as 5 faced physical punishment for offenses that were simply normal childhood behavior. Dropping things, playing during work time, showing curiosity. Then he found an entry that made his blood run cold. August 12th, 1854. Photographer Whitfield arrived from Savannah. Children prepared for portrait. Restraints removed for photography session duration, 2 hours. Play activity supervised in yard. Restraints reapplied following session. The date matched exactly. August 12th, 1854. The children had been temporarily released from restraints specifically for the photography session, brief freedom designed to create carefree childhood illusions for northern audiences. But the entry confirmed something else. Restraints were routine, not exceptional punishment, standard practice for controlling enslaved children at Ashford. Raymond continued through records, building a comprehensive picture. Enslaved children worked from age 5 or 6, initially light tasks, graduating quickly to demanding labor, minimal food, no education, harsh punishment for any perceived disobedience. In a separate ledger, he found a birth registry listing enslaved children born 1854. Cross-referencing ages and punishment logs, Raymond identified the 5 photographed children: Sarah, age 10, Thomas, age 8, Patience, age 7, Samuel, age 6, Little Grace, age 5. The registry included mothers' names but no fathers, common practice reflecting plantation refusal to acknowledge enslaved families. Finding enslaved people's descendants requires patience, creativity, and access to fragmentary records. Raymond Foster partnered with Dr. Angela Morris, a genealogist specializing in African American family history, to trace lines of the 5 photographed children. They started with post-emancipation records, the 1870 census, first listing formerly enslaved people by full names. In Burke County, Georgia, where Ashford Plantation had been located, they found several families with the surname Ashford, indicating they'd taken their former enslaver's name, common practice. Among them, Sarah Ashford, age 26, living with husband Robert and 3 children. The age matched perfectly. She'd been 10 in 1854, 26 in 1870. "That's her," Angela said, pulling up the census record. "Sarah from the photograph. She survived the war, married, had children. Now we trace forward." The trail led through marriage records, death certificates, property deeds. Sarah lived until 1903, dying at age 59 in Atlanta, where she'd moved after the war. Her children and grandchildren scattered across Georgia and eventually to northern cities during the Great Migration. After 2 weeks' intensive research, Angela found a living descendant, Dr. Lorraine Hayes, a retired Philadelphia educator, great-great-granddaughter of photographed Sarah. Raymond called her on a Tuesday evening, nervous about explaining his discovery. "Doctor." Hayes answered on the second ring, voice warm but cautious, when Raymond identified himself as a historian researching Ashford Plantation. "My grandmother told stories about that place," Dr. Hayes said. "Nothing good. What have you found?" Raymond explained the photograph, the dirt objects, plantation records documenting brutal treatment of enslaved children. He sent enhanced images as they spoke. The line went silent. Then, "That's my great-great-grandmother? That little girl holding the chain?" "We believe so, yes. Sarah, age 10 in 1854, the oldest child in the photograph." "She's playing with a chain," Dr. Hayes said, voice thick with emotion. "Like it's a toy, like it's a jump rope." "Records indicate she'd been restrained with those chains earlier that same day," Raymond said gently. "Removed temporarily for the photograph, then reapplied afterward. We think she and the other children played with objects that had been used to punish and control them, because those were the only objects available." Dr. Hayes was crying now. "My grandmother used to tell a story about how her grandmother, Sarah, would never let family children play with anything metal. No toy soldiers, no tin cups, nothing. She said metal was trouble. We thought she was just superstitious. But this explains it," Raymond finished. While Raymond traced descendants, Michael Torres and Jennifer Washington investigated Charles Whitfield, the photographer. What they discovered complicated the narrative unexpectedly. Whitfield had been a successful Savannah photographer, operating a studio from 1848 until his 1872 death. His client list included wealthy plantation owners, merchants, politicians. He was known for flattering portraits and, increasingly in the 1850s, propaganda images designed to counter abolitionist criticism. But Michael found something unexpected in Whitfield's personal papers at the Savannah Historical Society, a private journal kept from 1850 to 1865. Entries were sporadic, often months between updates, but revealed a deeply conflicted man. A July 1854 entry, just before photographing the Ashford children, read, "I'm hired to create lies with my camera. Plantation owners want images of smiling slaves, well-fed children, orderly fields. They want proof their peculiar institution is humane and just. But what I see through my lens tells different stories. I see people in chains, children who should play but instead labor, families torn apart at auction blocks. Yet I take their money and create demanded images because I have a family to feed and business to maintain. I am complicit in evil, and I know it." Michael shared this with Jennifer, who read it with growing surprise. He knew he was creating propaganda, felt guilty, but kept doing it. "There's more," Michael said, pulling up another entry dated August 1854, the Ashford photograph's exact month. "Today, I photographed children at the Ashford place. The overseer arranged them in the yard, told them to play naturally, as if such a thing were possible. I saw what surrounded them: shackles, chains, whipping post pieces carved into crude toys, children literally playing with bondage instruments. I framed the shot to include these objects, knowing Ashford wouldn't see them, knowing Northern critics wouldn't look closely enough. But they're there, in the image, preserved forever. Perhaps someday someone will see what I saw. Perhaps someday this photograph will testify to truth rather than the lie it was commissioned to tell." Jennifer sat back, stunned. He did it deliberately. Knew the objects were there, made sure they were visible. This wasn't accidental documentation, intentional subversion. They found more entries describing similar subtle rebellion. Whitfield photographed enslaved people with visible whipping scars, captured deep sadness expressions in supposedly happy portraits, deliberately framed shots including evidence of poor living conditions. He created paid-for propaganda while embedding truth for anyone looking closely enough. But he never spoke out publicly, Michael noted. To fully understand what the children had been playing with, Jennifer Washington brought in Dr. Patricia Chen, a forensic archaeologist specializing in slavery-era artifacts. If they could identify specific photograph objects and match them to similar excavated items, they could provide concrete evidence of conditions enslaved children endured. Patricia examined enhanced images with a practiced eye from excavating dozens of plantation sites. These objects are consistent with restraint devices used throughout the South in the mid-19th century, she confirmed. The wrist shackles were mass-produced in northern factories, ironically, and sold to southern plantations. The chain links appear standard configuration for leg irons. She pointed to wooden carved figures. These are more unusual. Enslaved people, including children, created toys and tools from whatever materials were available. Wood from punishment posts, broken tool handles, even auction block pieces. There's an archaeological term, adaptive reuse. But that clinical language doesn't capture what it really means. People taking dehumanizing objects and transforming them into daily life objects, even play. Jennifer arranged for Patricia to visit museum collections holding slavery-era artifacts. At the National Museum of African American History and Culture, they examined actual restraints used on enslaved children, some as small as those visible in the Ashford photograph. Child restraints were common, Patricia explained, holding up small iron cuffs. Plantation owners claimed they were necessary to prevent children from running away or causing mischief. But the reality was they were psychological control tools. A child growing up in shackles learns freedom itself is impossible. She showed carved wooden toys from various plantation sites. Crude dolls, animals, simple geometric shapes. Many were made by the children themselves or their parents, but look at this one. She held up a small carved person figure. See these marks? Bloodstain, soaked into the wood. This was carved from a whipping post, just like toys in your photograph. Within a month, Patricia organized a small archaeological excavation at the former Ashford plantation site, now part of a state wildlife preserve. Using historical maps and the photograph to identify likely locations, her team began careful yard area excavation where children had been photographed. Results were vindicating and heartbreaking. 3 feet below current surface in 1850s soil layers, they found 2 child-sized iron shackles, corroded but intact chain sections matching photograph types, carved wooden fragments including part of a doll or animal figure, metal fragments from locks and restraint mechanisms, and most poignantly, a small wooden top, child's toy, carved with initials, S.A. Sarah Ashford, Raymond breathed when Patricia showed him the carved top. The Library of Congress held a press conference on a cold February morning, 6 months after Michael Torres first noticed the photograph object. The main reading room packed with journalists, historians, descendants, and public members who'd heard about the discovery. Jennifer Washington stood at a podium, the 1854 photograph projected on a massive screen behind her. At standard view, it showed what it had always shown, 5 children playing in a dirt yard, apparently carefree and happy. For 170 years, Jennifer began, this photograph has existed in archives as pro-slavery propaganda. an image created to convince northern audiences that enslaved children were well treated and content. But when we examined this image with modern technology, we discovered something that transforms our understanding entirely. The image zoomed in, focusing on ground around the children. The objects became visible: shackles, chains, carved wooden toys from punishment posts. The room fell silent. These children, Jennifer continued, were not playing with toys. They were playing with enslavement instruments, with shackles removed from their wrists and ankles just hours before, with chains that would be locked onto them again as soon as the photographer left, with carved figures made from wooden posts where they and their families were whipped. She introduced Dr. Hayes and other descendants, who stood together before assembled press. Hayes spoke, voice steady despite emotion. My great-great-grandmother Sarah was 10 when this photograph was taken. According to plantation records, she'd been whipped 3 times that year for minor offenses: dropping a water bucket, speaking without permission, playing when she should work. She lived in constant fear and pain. When the photographer came, she was told to play, to smile, to prove slavery was kind. So she picked up a chain, the same chain that had restrained her, and held it where the camera could see. She bore witness the only way she could. Raymond presented archaeological evidence showing excavated object photographs: the shackles, chains, wooden top with Sarah's initials. This photograph is not just an image, he said. It's a crime scene. It documents child abuse, psychological torture, systematic dehumanization, and it was created intentionally as propaganda to justify these crimes. The press conference lasted 3 hours. Multiple journalists asked about photographer Whitfield and his stated intentions. Jennifer addressed this directly. Whitfield wrote in his journal that he deliberately framed this shot to include objects as hidden truth-telling. Some might see this as moral complexity or even courage. But I want to be clear, Whitfield profited from slavery. The Ashford photograph discovery prompted researchers nationwide to re-examine other slavery-era images with similar skepticism. Jennifer Washington coordinated a collaborative project involving dozens of archives, libraries, and museums, using advanced imaging technology to analyze hundreds of plantation photographs taken in the 1840s, 1860s. Results were disturbing and revelatory. In photograph after photograph marketed as showing contented slaves or well-treated servants, researchers found evidence of abuse, restraint, and suffering hidden in plain sight. A Louisiana photograph showing enslaved children playing near a barn revealed, upon close examination, that several children had visible whipping scars on their arms and legs. A Mississippi image depicting a happy enslaved family was found to show ankle restraints partially hidden under the father's trousers and heavy wrist scarring consistent with long-term shackling. A South Carolina photograph of children resting in a field showed them positioned before a whipping post, with dried blood still visible on the wood. These photographs were designed to lie, Jennifer explained at a symposium bringing together project researchers. But if you look closely enough, the truth is always there. Photographers either didn't notice or didn't care that abuse evidence was visible in their carefully composed propaganda images. Dr. Raymond Foster expanded his research beyond Ashford Plantation, examining punishment logs from dozens of other plantations across the South. Child restraint was not exceptional, he reported. It was standard practice. Children as young as 4 or 5 were subjected to shackles, chains, and confinement as control and punishment forms. And yes, there's documentation of children playing with these restraint devices, either because they had no other toys, or because transforming oppression instruments into playthings was a psychological survival mechanism. Patricia Chen's archaeological team began excavations at several other former plantation sites, guided by enhanced photographs showing possible buried artifacts. At each site, they found similar evidence: child-sized restraints, chains, carved toys from punishment equipment, and childhood debris stolen by slavery. But research also revealed something hopeful: resistance. In many carved toys and adapted objects, archaeologists found evidence of subtle defiance: initials carved into wooden figures, decorative patterns that might have been coded messages, small creativity acts asserting humanity in the face of systematic dehumanization. These children and their families refused to be completely broken, Patricia said. Yes, they were forced to play with chains. Yes, they lived under constant violence threat. But they also carved toys, told stories, created beauty where they could. The photograph shows both slavery's horror and the resilience of people who survived it. Dr. Hayes and other descendants became advocates for this more complex slavery-era photograph understanding. Within a year of the photograph's revelation, it had become one of the most widely used primary sources in teaching about American slavery. But educators struggled with responsible presentation, how to help students understand what they were seeing without causing trauma or reinforcing dehumanizing narratives. Dr. Angela Morris partnered with teachers nationwide to develop age-appropriate curriculum materials. For elementary students, the focus was on resilience and childhood. These children found ways to play and be creative even in very difficult circumstances. The objects weren't explicitly identified as restraints. Instead, teachers emphasized how children throughout history have made toys from whatever materials were available. For middle school students, curriculum became more direct. Teachers showed the standard photograph first, asking students what they saw. Usually responses focused on children playing happily. Then came enhanced images, showing objects clearly. Shackles, chains, carved toys from punishment posts. The contrast between initial impression and reality became a powerful lesson about how photographs can mislead, how propaganda works, and why critical primary source examination matters. High school and college curricula went deeper, incorporating plantation records, Whitfield's conflicted journal entries, archaeological evidence, and descendant testimonies. Students analyzed how the photograph functioned as both propaganda and inadvertent documentation, how enslaved children survived psychologically, and how trauma transmitted across generations. Dr. Hayes became a frequent school guest speaker, bringing family photographs spanning 5 generations from Sarah to her own grandchildren. "This is what resistance looks like," she told students, gesturing between the 1854 image and contemporary family photos. "My great-great-grandmother survived horrors you can't imagine. She was forced to play with chains as a child, but she grew up, had children, built a life. And here I am, her descendant, a doctor, a free woman. That's the full story." Teachers reported profound impacts. Students who had been disengaged suddenly understood slavery not as abstract history, but as lived reality. The photograph made it visceral. Seeing children their age or younger playing with torture instruments challenged any remaining antebellum South romanticization. But curriculum also emphasized agency and resistance. These children weren't just victims. They were survivors who found ways to preserve their humanity and leave testimony for the future. One high school teacher in Atlanta wrote, "My students will never forget this photograph. It changed how they see everything, not just slavery, but how power works, how propaganda functions, how important it is to look closely at what we're told is normal." On a humid Georgia morning in August 2025, exactly 171 years after the photograph was taken, a memorial was dedicated at the former Ashford plantation site. The monument consisted of bronze sculptures of the 5 children from the photograph, positioned as they had been in 1854, but with one crucial difference. The chains, shackles, and punishment post toys were rendered in bronze as well, impossible to overlook or ignore. More than 300 people attended the ceremony, including Dr. Hayes, Marcus Jefferson, and other descendants of enslaved people from Ashford Plantation. State officials, historians, educators, and public members gathered beneath oak trees whose roots had witnessed the events documented in that photograph. Jennifer Washington spoke first, standing before the memorial. For 170 years, this photograph existed as propaganda, an image designed to hide slavery's truth. But the children in this image refused to let truth be completely hidden. They held suffering evidence where the camera could see it, trusting that someday someone would look closely enough. Today, we honor that trust by ensuring their testimony is never forgotten. Raymond Foster read the names: Sarah, age 10, Thomas, age 8, Patience, age 7, Samuel, age 6, Grace, age 5. As he spoke each name, a descendant came forward to place flowers at the memorial. When he reached Grace's name, the child who died at age 8, just 3 years after the photograph, the silence was profound. Dr. Hayes addressed the crowd, voice strong despite tears. "My great-great-grandmother Sarah lived to be 59 years old. She survived slavery, survived the Civil War, survived Reconstruction. She married, had children, saw grandchildren born. She never spoke about the worst of what she endured. Some trauma is too deep for words, but she left us this photograph. She made sure we would see, and now we do." The memorial included an interactive element, tablets mounted beside the sculptures showing the original photograph at standard magnification, then allowing visitors to zoom in and discover the objects themselves, recreating Michael Torres's original discovery moment. Children visiting could experience that same revelation. What looks normal from a distance reveals horror upon closer inspection. Patricia Chen explained the archaeological component, a small excavation site preserved under glass, showing some actual objects recovered from this exact spot. "These are real," she told the assembled crowd. "These shackles restrained real children. These chains bound real bodies. This isn't metaphor or symbol. This is evidence." As the ceremony concluded, Dr. Hayes stood alone before the memorial, looking at the bronze sculpture of Sarah holding a chain like a jump rope, looking directly at the camera with those knowing, determined eyes. "You did it," Dr. Hayes whispered to her ancestor. "We see you now."